in that scenario, it's branching off. The world is actually branching off into multiple universes. And this is one of the reasons why some scientists don't like the multiverse idea. They're like, okay, how can that be happening? How can we have that many universes just branching off? It doesn't seem parsimonious. It's like it's just wasting resources. But to whatever's going on. Now, this gets into the question of time and timelines. And, we talked a little bit about this last time, so we may not want to go too deep on it this time. But like possible futures, do we try out these possible futures? And then we end up choosing the one that is the one that what would be sort of the consensus future based upon the choices of multiple people that are looking at it.
Well, in trying out those futures, is that like a seed scenario? And I just made up that term, so let me explain what I mean by that. You had said earlier, you had given the example of creating, all these different versions of ancient civilization. So we use the examples of like ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, and ancient Greece. So as you let them develop over a time warp period to get to the present day or beyond, are you based on meaning something that was from the past, creating the butterfly effect to see what it turns into and then picking that reality?
I think so. I think there's an element of that. Now, I think it's more like we're pre-visualizing what happens, and then we are picking one of those realities. So there's an interpretation of quantum mechanics that basically says, rather than simply us choosing, the probability wave collapsing for the cat to be alive or dead, there's actually several possible futures. And those futures are sending us back information. Okay, it's almost like so I got interested in this idea, and I wrote a book called The Simulated Multiverse about this idea. If you just look back at how like a chess game is played, an AI chess game, or the first—
Wait, an AI chess game?
Sorry, just a code that's playing chess.
Okay, yeah.
If you just think of there's an algorithm called the Minimax algorithm. This is a really simple one. In fact, we could bring up just a little diagram. There's tons of diagrams out there. But the basic idea is that what these chess-playing computers would do is they would basically try out several moves and say, okay, what's the most likely scenario? If I do this move, what's that guy going to do? The one on the left.
Yeah, so they're taking permutation. They're taking all kinds of permutations of past moves.
Yeah, but they're also trying to project forward and say, what would happen?
Sure.
Am I going to win
Sure.
in this scenario? Am I going to win in that scenario? There's this idea of a fitness function that's or some type of function that says, how good is scenario X or Y 10 moves down? And so you can tweak those parameters to try to get the game to choose. Like if it's 50 moves down, it has to keep track of a heck of a lot more data, right? But if it's just the simplest expression is, what is the next best move for me? But that's not as good as going out 2 moves ahead.
Sure.
Because you can test out multiple scenarios. And I wonder if the simulation isn't doing that, where at a civilizational level or even at a personal level, we are branching out different possibilities to try them out. And then we are then picking the one that is the most appropriate. Now I'm using that in quotes because it's hard to define what is the most appropriate. It depends on the nature of the simulation, the nature of our roles. It could be what's best for one person is not best for another person. So you may have different conflicting types of fitness functions or appropriateness functions. But the basic idea is I think we could be in a situation where multiple timelines have played out. And that also is what leads us into this sense of deja vu. So getting back to what I was saying is, in this interpretation of quantum mechanics, if these futures are sending back messages to us, how's that possible unless they exist? Like, how could they
all of them?
Well, let's say 3 of them. Let's say there's 3 of them, right?
But that's where you lose me. How do 3? Because then there are 3. They're, to think of it like decision trees. There's 3 potential decision trees, and there's only one that technically would tie back, right? Because there's only one that ends up happening, unless it's a multiverse scenario where they all happen.
Yeah, and so my point of simulated multiverse was exactly that, where in a multiverse, the way that it's normally defined, so the multiverse is a second interpretation of the quantum indeterminacy and the observer effect. And what they say in the multiverse, and people know about this because of superhero movies, which have different versions of Batman and different versions of Superman, and Spider-Man being one of the better. I think the animated Spider-Man is probably one of the better multiverse movies, I think. But in that scenario, it's branching off. The world is actually branching off into multiple universes. And this is one of the reasons why some scientists don't like the multiverse idea. They're like, okay, how can that be happening? How can we have that many universes just branching off? It doesn't seem parsimonious. It's like it's just wasting resources. But if it's a simulated multiverse, then it's a much easier scenario to buy, I think, because what you're doing is you're not cloning the whole physical universe. You're just cloning information. You're just basically branching off. And information cloning is much easier than like cloning a whole planet. Like, can we clone? I mean, we can clone something really small, but we can't clone something really big. It takes time, even in nature, even if it's the same genetics, it takes time to like grow something. But
don't tell Ben Lamb that.
That's right. He was the direwolf guy, right?
That's right. He was in that seat a couple months ago.
Oh, he was? Okay.
Yeah.
But he still had to grow that wolf. Like, it didn't start off as an adult clone of a wolf.
It's a woolly rat right now. But
oh, is it? Okay, yeah.
They're working on the woolly mammoth.
Yeah, they're working on getting it up there. Well, that's pretty interesting. But it's very easy to clone information. In fact, most computer processors, they have a command at the low level called clone the bits of information. And so it's much easier to try out different scenarios and to have what's a multiverse just means you're trying this, now you're trying that, and you're trying that. But you can also prune the tree in a simulated scenario. You don't have to go through all possible scenarios everywhere. So you can get rid of this parsimonious idea. Like, scientists like things to be parsimonious, which basically means they don't want to waste a lot of resources.
Sure.
But many scientists do agree on the multiverse idea. Many don't like it. So you have this kind of, fight going on whether that's a realistic idea or not. But in a simulated multiverse, you can have a branch, and based upon the observers or who are watching the simulations, they can prune certain branches so that it's not infinite. Physicists love infinity. Okay, physicists always like to talk about, that's just infinite. It just goes on for infinity. Computer scientists, we hate infinity because we know we don't have infinite resources. We don't have infinite time. We don't have infinite memory. And so what we do is we try to optimize. And so a lot of my conclusions about us, the physical world being a simulation, are based upon things that look like optimizations. To me, having built video games and having written code. And this is one of those where what it means to clone a universe is all you're doing is you're running a different scenario and then you're coming back and now you're running this scenario. So it's very possible. And we talked about Philip K. Dick, but I don't know if I told you the story.
We talked a lot about him.
Did we talk about the JFK scenario?
We talked a lot about Man in the High Castle. We also watched the video that you referenced earlier where he talked about fragmentation and how then he was able to get all those memories. And we talked about multiple ones of his book. I don't think we talked on camera about the JFK thing.
So this is interesting because what we talked about with respect to the Man in the High Castle was that a real timeline when Germany and Japan won the war, World War II?
Yeah, just as a refresher for people, Man in the High Castle, if you have not seen the TV show, which is based on Philip K. Dick, it's the idea that what you just said, Nazis won World War II along with Japan, and so they have now colonized much of the world, including the United States. Japan controls the West, Nazis control the East, but there's a small group of people within the United States who have access to these reels that show the Allies winning the war, which is an ultimate other scenario of the multiverse that we actually exist in here, but that they're trying to make true in their warped reality. But please continue.
Right. So they're seeing a different timeline, basically, in these reels. And then there's a guy that can actually travel. So that's spoiler alert, at least at the end of season 1. But it's interesting because when I interviewed his wife, Philip K. Dick's wife, Tessa, who's still around, she's much older now, but she told me that he came to believe that was a real timeline, the Germany and Japan winning the war timeline. And I mentioned it earlier when I talked about fragmentary memories versus getting the full memories. But she said that in his case, the simulators that he was communicating with, who are supposedly changing variables, also said that they prevented the JFK assassination in Dallas. But then what happened in the next timeline was he got assassinated in Orlando. And then if they try to change that, he got assassinated somewhere else. Or the timeline just led to a worse outcome, meaning it led to like a nuclear war type scenario. And so they're back to this timeline. So we almost have this idea of a consensus, what Philip K. Dick called a consensus gentium reality, right? Most of us remember one timeline, but some people remember little bits and pieces of other timelines. This touches on the Mandela effect, which we spent a little bit of time on last time. But it's interesting that that's a way to describe, this idea of trying out multiple things. It's possible that we are currently only on one branch, right? This is a branch that's also being tried out to see where it will end up. And perhaps this branch will be reset at some point in the future because like
reset?
Meaning like what we think of as history we might wake up one day and think something else happened, like the Soviet Union didn't collapse in 1989 or, the World War II scenario or JFK didn't, because we think the past is fixed, right? But the delayed choice experiment, the delayed double slit delayed choice experiment by John Wheeler, who's one of my favorite physicists, shows us that when the probability wave collapses, what happens is we're not just choosing the current moment, but we're choosing from one of multiple possible pasts. Okay, that sounds weird, doesn't it? I mean, that sounds ridiculous.
Yes, please extrapolate.
Okay, so let's bring up the cosmic delayed choice experiment. And this is really weird. So quantum mechanics is weird. This is like really weird. And I'll show you how this ties to video games, which I think will make it easier for people to understand. But let's see.
That one on the left?
Yeah, let's go to, let's get a different one that shows Earth. Just go to images.
The second one?
No, the one on the bottom left, which has sorry, where did it go?
Go back.
No,
go
back.
back, Joe. Sorry. The yellow line.
Yeah, the yellow one. Yeah, let's go to the yellow line one because I think that's perhaps an easier.
Can we blow that up, Joe?
Or how about the one on the right, the bottom right?
Right there?
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right. Okay. Let's blow that up and let Riz cook.
Okay, so this is one of the hardest concepts to understand and one of the most mind-blowing because if the simulation hypothesis says physical space is not what we think it is, but also time is not what we think it is. And that's what this experiment, when Wheeler conceived it, and he worked at Princeton, he had an office across from Einstein. He coined the phrase "it from bit." I'm sure we talked about that last time.
We talked about that in the first hour last time.
So let's suppose there was an object that's really far away, like 1 billion light years away. That's that object on the upper right there. Let's say
so the little sun-looking thing.
Yeah, it's like a sun-looking thing, but it's so far away. And it's sending out light, and then suppose we're down here on Earth, on the bottom left, and we have these two telescopes. And the telescopes can figure out, you see the galaxy in the middle, or whatever that object is in the middle. It could be a black hole, it could be a galaxy. That the light has to go either to the left or to the right of that galaxy before it gets here. Now, in this picture, you can look, and it looks like it's closer to the source than it is to Earth, right? So if that is 1 billion light years away, let's suppose that is, 300 million light years from that, so 700 million light years. 700 million years from here and 700 million light years from here. Okay, or let's just put it in the middle. It's much simpler to understand.
Okay.
Let's suppose it's right in the middle. So the light has to go around that galaxy, and the decision of whether to go to the left or to the right would have had to have been made 500 million years ago, 500 million years ago.
Because of the time passing between us being able to...
Yeah, to get it. To get here, it takes 500 million years. Yep. So it's kind of like saying something happened in 1900. It had to be 125 years ago because that's kind of when it happened. But because we know the speed of light is fixed, and that's what light years are, it's the amount of time it takes light to go a year. That's about how far away it would have to be, which is also how long ago that decision would have had to have been made. But what the delayed choice experiment is showing us is that when the light is measured here by the telescope, it's only then that the decision is made about whether the light went to the left or to the right. So that's weird. because it's basically saying the light is in a state of superposition, meaning there's two possible histories. There's a history where it went left and there's a history that it went right. And it should have been done back in the days of the dinosaurs is when the decision should be made. But what this experiment is showing us is that the decision is made when we measure it, now. So we're in fact choosing from one of several possible pasts.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.